This. All right. Hi, everybody. I am Stacy and want to welcome you to our topic about fractional work. Lindsey, if you joined through Slack, she was kind enough to set this all up for us, but unfortunately is sick today, so is not able to join us. But we're recording this so that everybody who wants to see this afterwards can see it. Just to let you know, we'll spend the first half chatting about like my experience, Jay-Z's experience, and then we'll get into Q&A for the second half hour. So we can just get started. Jay-Z, do you want to introduce yourself?
Wow, this is good.
Please call me jz.ai. I am a artificial intelligence leader specializing fractionally in the AI design sprint for technology space. Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I am Stacy Schroeder. I am a social media consultant, so I help global brands elevate their brands through social media. And so I've been in the social space for over 10 years now. And so I guess jz.ai, do you want to share a bit about your story and how you decided to get started in fractional work?
Thanks. I've launched over 10 products for small, medium, and enterprise. I've worked at social media startups, fintech, mid-sized companies, and then at Capital One, which is a large credit card company, launching AI products in web, mobile, and chat. Oh, and I didn't answer your question why I decided to get into fractional. Sorry about that. So it's a great time because there's a lot more literature around how to get into fractional. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I can share my story. So I was at Disney for 12 years, first at Disney Channel, and then I ran social media for Radio Disney up until the beginning of 2021, where they decided to close Radio Disney and we all got laid off. And so then I moved into a toy company called MJ Entertainment, and I was the social media director for LOL Surprise, which is one of the world's largest toy brands for girls, a major competitor to Barbie. And then after a year and a half being there, it got toxic. And so I decided to leave, thinking I would just find another director of social media role. And then after about 6 months, last like fall and then into last spring, I was not getting any offers. And so I was like, okay, I need to take matters into my own hands, find something, another path. And so I decided to start looking into freelance consulting, fractional work. In my mind, they're all similar. And I guess we can maybe talk about the different nuance of that. And so I just started asking around like to people. I'm part of Women in Toys, which is an organization, and they had an event here. I live in LA, and met a woman who has been doing freelance for a long time, and she was so kind. And so I then set up with a coffee with her where I brought like a dozen questions just like on a note on my phone and then would like type out all her answers. And so I'm happy to like share all the information that I was able to get that way. And so decided to set myself up as a sole proprietor. And we can get into like, yeah, that decision. And I then decided, like I just started like telling some of the people I'd been doing a lot of coffees and lunches, and so decided to like tell all those people that I now had in my corner that I was looking into other types of work. And pretty quickly, a friend reached out because a friend of hers had talked to her about who was working at Headspace, that their podcast team wanted some social help. And I do more strategy level, and this was more like content level, but I was like open to taking the meeting and realized like what a great first client that would be to have. And so I like took that work on just to like have the name, be able to start doing something, get some income coming back in. And then from there was able to bring on a handful of other clients, and we can get more into, we'll do the next step after this, on how I was then able to get this ball rolling. All right, so let's our Okay, so that was a little bit about the first steps. JZ.ai, do you want to chat about your first steps as well?
Thanks, Stacy. I joined two communities, one led by John Arms, who teaches fractional, and then a second led by Lindsey MacNeil, who manages this huge Slack channel. So I would say first, from John, I learned how to be fractional. And then from Karina, I've been talking to non-compete referrals. And so since I'm a product and growth leader in AI, I'll talk to COOs, people who are leading HR, people who are not doing exactly what I'm doing, but who want my AI skill set. And so just like Stacy, I always start off with the small consulting projects, and then I'll grow it into something that's more of a retainer, which, defines fractional. And then looking for that leadership role where I'm not the IC, like Stacy said, a more strategic role where there's already a team, but I'm on retainer only for 1, maybe 2 days a week, helping that team upskill on AI and the intersection with innovation and design thinking.
That brought up, so one of the things I did to prepare as well, I joined LinkedIn Premium for the free 1 month, and there was a freelancing course that was just very helpful in like the overview of the freelancing side of things. So figuring out what your like statement is, your I help statement, and then talking about like how you build your scope of work in order to have like a contract. And with that, I like it. Something that emphasizes, and then also something that's emphasized in Never Search Alone, is having that niche that you are fulfilling. So not trying to be as broad as possible, which might be your gut instinct to be broad, but to say like, I do social media strategy for the kids and family space. And then if there's people outside of the kids and family space, they might be like, well, you could probably do this too. And I can. The thing is, we're all professionals. We all can just take on the things that people ask us to do. So be as small as possible, and then you will be able to get things outside of that. Do you agree?
Absolutely. So that's the first thing, is to niche down. And mine is I make AI fun for large enterprises who want to know what's their first investment in AI.
Amazing. And so how did you set up yourself as a business?
Well, I incorporated last year my consulting business. So I had already, done the LLC, not a sole prop, but I do LLC pass through to my personal taxes. And then as fractional, you can continue on that LLC plan.
Yeah, I decided to do sole proprietor because while I'm doing this, I am still also looking for a full-time opportunity. So I figured sole proprietor is the easiest to have this going on. Plus, then in case I do get a full-time, I can easily straddle both, basically. All right. How have you been able to get clients?
I think through a referral, mainly. I've really enjoyed Karina's fractional community, because everyone is super old, like in the sense that like they're experienced and super smart. And it's very different from the VC communities I'm in, where everyone's like 20 years old and every idea is a good idea. So I think the fractional referrals have been a really healthy lead gen space. Second, I also teach a class about generating leads through podcasting. So I will pitch that my first class is on Monday. It's a 2-hour boot camp, and it's been really interesting because the class is about inviting your leads, prospects, and potential clients to a podcast, so that it doesn't really matter if you have like only 10 followers. If you get a client on a podcast, talk about their goals and their struggles, it's very, very fun and very easy to convert them from from prospect to client.
Nice. I've been able to get clients a few different ways. So as I mentioned, the first one was through a mutual friend. And then I did a LinkedIn post announcing that I had started my own business, and that did really well on LinkedIn. And so then had somebody who had seen that reach out about a project that then they brought me on to do the strategy for them. And then I also, since I do like was in the toy space, so I'm in like the toy and game space. When the Toy of the Year award nominations came out, I went to find on through LinkedIn whoever was the head of marketing for each of the mid-sized companies. So the larger companies like Mattel, like they already have in-house people doing what I do. And then the smaller, tiny companies, they aren't at a level yet that they need my services. So I went to the mid-tier companies and just would find whoever was the head of marketing, and would just reach out and say, like, try connect with them. And then I have those 200 characters to say, saw that your toy is nominated for Toy of the Year, just wanted to reach out and say congrats. And then like just left it at that. And so then from there, one woman responded and said, hey, like, let's chat. We have a need. And so because of like those two right there, I was able to have a very packed fall this past year. And then I also like have former coworkers that I'm like doing a project with. And yeah, and then like one of the people that was at this, like one of the companies has left. And so she brought me on to do a project with her new, now she's doing more contract and fractional work. So it's just, yeah, through a lot of relationships and then LinkedIn as well. All right, so let's get into how have you found that fractional work differs from full-time jobs?
There's a lot more selling. So you're your own boss. You have to keep selling even when you're working, right? So there's this balance between working and prospecting. I also find that it's really satisfying because you can easily tell if your ideas are being appreciated. And because it's at the strategic level, I can easily tell if the client is into innovation, into AI, into brainstorming, into redefining the problem. And if they're not, then, very easy to qualify and move on.
I've also found it's nice to not be in the politics at a company. You are a little bit removed from that. So you give them information and you're like, take it or leave it. Like you have to pay me either way for this. And so then they have to figure out like how to sell it to like their boss or whoever. But I do like one of the downsides is I miss benefits. I miss having paid time off. I like, have to purchase my own healthcare now. So there's definitely pros and cons to both sides of things. So then I guess my last question in the list of questions I had, are you planning to continue with your fractional work, or do you also want to find a full-time opportunity?
I'm open to all types of work, full-time, consulting, fractional. And I think that keeps me in the game because some people start at consulting or they start at fractional. You never know where you're going to find that like amazing challenge. So open to it all.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like I would like to have a full-time job in the future, but for now I'm happy with this. So I'm being very picky as I'm looking at full-time opportunities. And so I like having this so that I like feel comfortable being picky and not just running to whoever is willing to give me a full-time job. Okay, so we can start opening it up for questions. Feel free to either come off of mute and ask a question or ask a question in the chat. We'll make sure to get to it.
I have a quick question. Hi, everybody. I'm still kind of like a little bit confused with the contractor consulting fractional distinction. I kind of have, because I'm starting my own business where there's a consulting kind of arm to it, but it's a facilitation practice first. So the facilitation practice first is to kind of align the stakeholders to understand what we're working on is really going to be the right thing. Like if there's actually some steps back that we need to take, or that the organization needs to take, the client, et cetera. And then if there's a gap in terms of headcount or skills or anything like that, then I can come in as a consultant and charge a lot of money, basically. But I see the fractional part of me, so I'm calling it like a fractional facilitation. And that's coming in, just kind of plugging in and doing some facilitation workshops, and I can even do it, on an ongoing basis, as kind of their internal facilitator. But the consulting side is much more, it's different because you're actually executing the thing. So that's how I see it in my head, at least in my kind of perspective and how I'm applying it. But I'm curious to see how everybody else might make those distinctions.
Yeah, so I'm
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, so Omar, in my case, fractional is execution. It's not just the advising, it's strategic and tactical all wrapped together. So you're literally a member of the team, you're just not a full-time member. Where, at least for me in the past, consulting has been project and or advisory work. So I call that more on the outside looking in. And fractional is embedded there with the team, whatever your function is, just like you're a full-time employee, except they're getting you on a proportion of your week.
JZ.ai, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So the pure definition just for goal setting is that you're working only 1 day a week on retainer for 3 or more months, and that you're managing a team. So Omar, in your example, I do something very similar. I also do facilitation, but from a design thinking and AI perspective. So the people that I'm facilitating in that, first month, like every Monday for a month, they're also going to be the people who are going to help execute if I continue on month 2. So, on month 2, if we find that there's data missing in the data model, like data quantity is more of a problem than data quality, then I would have analysts, engineer, maybe a data scientist from that company who would be executing the strategy, and I wouldn't be doing it myself. Does that help with the distinction?
Yeah. I think in this, I think it can. I do like kind of how Rusty put it as well, how as a consultant, like I always see kind of as a consultant, you're going in kind of from your perspective after doing some analysis, telling people what to do, but then you also aren't getting much respect, or you don't get much you can't make as much of an impact because people are kind of more shied away from you coming in as an external. Whereas it's fractional, if I understand correctly, you're kind of more embedded into the team, and like the team kind of accepts you a little bit more.
Yeah, that's been my experience so far.
Yeah,
Right.
you're on retainer, so you keep going, but the purest definition is that you're also not doing the work only by yourself, that other
Right.
people at the company are executing.
Right.
I feel
Yep.
like where the name came from is that rather than having a full position, it's a fraction of a position that like maybe like other companies would have as a full-time position. So Melanie in the chat is asked, I'm curious about how you structure your client engagements, whether project-based or retainer or anything in between. Also curious how you price yourselves. So on my side, I have done like project-based, and then I've also like worked with a company and they brought me on for 3 days a week. And my preference is to have a fully like detailed scope of work rather than have the amount of days a week, because I am like can be very efficient. So I'd rather be deciding how much effort I'm putting into it based on a scope of work rather than based on my time. And so I would like always encourage you to try and do it like if you are doing, you know, this retainer, I feel like that's a different situation. But if you're coming in, try and do it through a scope of work rather than through saying like, oh, I'll work 3 days a week for you.
So I'll give a little bit different view, given that I'm kind of doing sales and business development. I do tend to, I do a retainer, but it's based on time you get of my week. So you're going to get a day, 2, 3 days a week, and it's how you utilize that. You know, if it's direct customer engagement, sitting in front of customers, it's managing the sales team, developing comp plans. Mine tends to be more, because sales is a lot more ad hoc in terms of reacting to the day-to-day stuff. So my retainers are based on a time slice of me in a week.
JZ.ai, you want to chime in?
I think it's both. You're both right. So Stacy, absolutely need to set the expectations of what the outcomes and deliverables and scope should be. And Rusty, you're right. You know, if you achieve beyond that, then there's always opportunity to continue the retainer, continue the time. I really like starting with the consulting project because it helps me figure out both those things. You know, we all have clients always have a knack of like underestimating. So it helps me map their scope to the estimated time.
And then on how to price yourself, this is something that I struggle with, and I feel like a lot of people do. How I tend to think about it is what I want my like a full-time salary to be, and then I figure out the hourly for that, and then you got to increase it because your taxes are different. So I feel like that's a starting point to then you think about like, oh, how many hours do I think this project will take, or like the scope of work would take, and then like be doing that math in the back of your head, but like don't share that with your client. And then go to your client with like a larger number that then can be negotiated down. But you also don't want to like then scare them away so that they like don't even try and negotiate with you. So it is a dance that you play. JZ, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research out there. I think the hourly starts at, well, no, the median hourly is about 200, and that's very impacted by the recession. So I heavily discount for day rates and retainers of, 3 months or more with a 1 day per week schedule. So I want to work with clients who are in it for the long run. And the last thing about pricing is that I've been getting lots of deal coaching. As a product manager, I've become like a growth leader now, and deal coaching is absolutely a thing. And so part of deal coaching is that the client always talks about the numbers. You ask about budget before you ever give a number. So I would not put your number, like I would not publish it because every client is different. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And then Jason in the chat asked about the different fractional communities.
Oh, I just wanted to, I just wanted to add like a slight follow-up question. But first of all, thank you all so much for sharing and for just being really open about all of this as someone has not done this yet and is really exploring things, and opportunities are kind of coming my way that I didn't expect. This might be more for Stacy because I feel like I'm in a similar situation to you. I really would like a full-time position, but I have this really cool fractional COO opportunity that's come my way. And there's some others too. I think it's like a when it rains it pours situation. But I do want to think about structuring any client engagements in a smart way should a full-time position come up. So I guess it's just sort of a bonus question to my original question about how you structure engagements, because it seems to me like I might get myself into a pickle if I I don't know. I don't think I'd start on a retainer basis. Sounds like it'll most likely be projects to start with, but I don't know. I'm just curious how that factors into how you interact with clients and how you sort of get things going, because you're thinking about full-time positions too.
Yeah, so two things on that. I just always move forward with things because I'm like, if nothing's for real, like in writing yet, then it's not for real. Like, just
Right.
keep moving forward with every opportunity. And then in my contracts, I make sure that there is usually it's a 30-day out. So then for any client that I have, I could just tell them, hey, like, it's been great working with you, but you have 30 days left with me because I got a full-time job. And then most employers understand that as well and would be willing to wait the 30 days. And if not, then that might be a red flag for the employer.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah. So then Jason in the chat asked about the different communities. So if anyone has any recommendations for the different communities you're part of, please add them to the chat. So that everyone can see who all of those are. And then Brian has his hand raised. So do we want to get to Brian?
Yeah, and just to Jason's question, I think Jay-Z AI, you mentioned two groups, John's group and the other person's group. If you could maybe share with us what those are, that would be helpful. My question was more around, I've led teams of billable customer-facing consultants for tech companies. And similar to you, Stacy, thought it would be easier than it's been to find another like director of consulting services role for a tech company. And increasingly what I'm hearing on my listening tour, what I'm hearing talking to colleagues is, especially at my age, maybe age is an advantage as a consultant. And there's always the potential that age could be perceived as a disadvantage as a full-time employee. So everybody's saying, hey, you really should consider being a consultant. Up until now, I've shied away from hanging out my shingle and being a sole proprietorship or an LLC. And I've been looking for maybe a small boutique consulting company that has a small stable of management and technology consultants, where they'd do some of the sales and some of the collections for me. I'm familiar with writing statements of work and all those things, but I guess I've been a little hesitant to go all in on being totally independent. Thoughts on that, especially Stacy and Jay-Z, but others as well? Do you have experience with small boutique firms, and how would you kind of compare and contrast what you're doing to that?
I don't have any experience with the small boutique firms. I mean, I think it's worth exploring every opportunity and then just feeling like see what feels right to you. And then yeah, just keep going. It's like that was one of the first things that somebody told me was like, you'll figure out how to get through the hoops when you get to the hoops, but like don't worry about that yet. Just like start having those conversations, start like reaching out to people, just having like informational conversations to see then if it leads to something more on the boutique side. But other than that, yeah. And then like, oh yeah, just you can be going down multiple paths at the same time.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think Joe also asked, what about marketplaces like Upwork? So you cannot avoid selling your services, right? If you're going to be on a platform, you still have to share it, and platform takes a cut. And like, I mean, if you're not going to be out there pitching yourself, I would almost recommend offering a 50% referral, because that's what it's going to take for someone else to be interested in selling you. And so I'd much recommend you just sell yourself, network, be friendly, like you all are doing right now, instead of going to these platforms where you're starting out, you're going to rank at the bottom unless you like super share the link and sell the platform, which will mask you. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah,
Brian.
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Cool. So we have another question from the chat. What is your strategy for teeing up work so that you're not sitting for too long with nothing coming in, but also not overlapping too much? For teeing up things, it's just like keep checking in with people, like be the squeaky wheel. And if it's not coming together, then it's not meant to be, like just then be a squeaky wheel somewhere else on another path. And then not overlapping too much. If you are having like an influx of things, start charging more and make more money.
That's awesome. I like that idea. Yeah, so for the cycles, I think it's like job searching. You know, you might apply to 10 jobs, get 3 interviews, spend a month interviewing, and then have to do it again. So I would take it as like, you know, these cycles. When it becomes an overlap, it's you just have to do it all. Like, I mean, you can delegate and hire a subcontractor or someone to help you, but it's really difficult. And I think there's great talent in this meeting. So if you have too much work, you know, like Stacy said, charge a lot, but then you can also hire one of these amazing people here.
Yeah,
Oh,
and also, oh, keep going.
sorry, the last thing is for keeping in touch, I have a Substack newsletter. So I consistently every week create content and people get it. You can also use like a CRM to follow up, but I think the newsletter helps because it's more scaled. Like I don't have to follow up with each person individually. Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, and also like a lot of the things that I have been doing have only been for like a few month contracts. So if you have a lot, it might only be for a couple months. And I feel like we can all handle being busy for a few months. Like if you have an end date, you can do anything. So just be busy for a few months and then you'll be grateful that you have that money for then when the times were slow. All right, so another question from the Slack is, has anyone had any experience, like, has anyone in the group had any luck working through marketplaces like Upwork? I have not. I don't like, I know that people have clearly, like, it's a good system, it's working. For like what I'm doing, I haven't seen any traction from that type of website. So everything I've been doing has been more one-on-one conversations rather than trying to reach a mass market through something like Upwork.
Yeah, I'm curious what everyone's aversion to one-on-one networking or sales is, because I think that's the root of that question is like, do I really have to do it or can a platform do it for me? So I'm just curious, like from the group.
So I actually, it was my question. It's not an aversion to networking. It's, you know, actually going back to that thing of when things are very busy and then sometimes they're quiet. And is this a way to pull in some supplemental work that can fill things out that, you know, when things are quiet and you're willing to take, you know, do some work for a little less money because there's nothing else competing for your attention, is it worthwhile to do it? And then obviously when things are busier, you can charge more money. You know, can maybe neglect that platform and go for the one-on-ones where you can make more money on it.
Oh, that's a really good point. So something that kind of works on your behalf passively. Well, you're passive. It's active, you're passive.
A little bit. Yeah. Just some lead gens.
Yeah. Okay. That seems like a
Doesn't sound like anyone on the call's had any luck with that though. So if they've even tried it.
No, but
Okay.
it does bring up another point I wanted to make sure we talk about a little bit more, is that like make sure even when you are busy to be making that time for yourself, because like your business is the #1 business over your client's business. So the way I do that, I generally like to use the hour of 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. to like do all of what I need to do. And then I start 9 a.m. on my clients. So I don't know if other people have ways that they like to do it. Just wanted to share that that's my preference. And then also just talking about networking, the way I've found it to be easier is when I like first left my job, I made a list of just a bunch of old coworkers that I liked and then just started reaching out to them one-on-one, like one by one, and getting coffee or lunch with them or having a Zoom call. And then since I started with the people that I feel like, you know, a kinship with, it didn't seem like networking. It didn't seem scary. And then it gave me confidence to then start reaching out to more of the people that like who was a higher level than I was, that I like didn't feel as confident at the beginning reaching out to. And then having more of those, then expanding the circle more and more. And then just reaching out to people that I didn't even know through LinkedIn. And knowing that when you reach out to people you don't know, only 10% are going to write back, but so you got to write to a lot of people so that you get that 10% to be higher. And so just the more that you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. So I just encourage you to make sure to spend a lot of time on those one-on-one conversations. All right, so we have another question in the chat. Any tips on setting your first engagement up for success? I'm thinking both about how I can ensure that an opportunity is a good fit for my skills and desires, but also about how I might lower the stakes since I've never done this before. So that's what I did. My first client with Headspace, but it was a bit lower level, lower level of the type of work that I wanted to be doing and a little bit less money than I was looking for, but such a great brand name. And so I agreed to do this and then was able to do it very efficiently. So I still am doing it each week, but it only takes me a few hours when initially they were talking about having me work for them for 2 days, but I was able to change it to a scope of work. So I'm able to deliver them content and social analytics each week in a way that is easy for me. And it's work that I like to be doing. And so I'm grateful to have that first client just to get things moving and then be able to tell other people, oh yes, I have a client, it's Headspace. It's such a good name. JZ.ai, what do you got?
I always like to start small, that's how you can see if you want to keep going. And you could even do it for trade. So I do a lot of skill trades, with sales leaders, I'll trade my AI services with them. And so it helps me understand what they see my value as, and they immediately also sell their value to me. So your first consulting could be a trade, and then it'll build testimonial and confidence for the next one.
Great. What other questions do people have? Oh, another one. Okay, in the chat. The meta message I'm picking up that many people here would prefer a full-time job with benefits, vacation, etc. Fractional consulting is the second choice. Am I reading that correctly? That is the case for me. I don't know if other people want to add in that as well. Maybe do a reaction thumbs up if you're feeling the same way. No, okay, it seems like some people aren't feeling that way. Okay, yeah, getting a few. Yeah, I guess is there then for the people who don't have a thumbs up, how are you feeling? What are you what do
Yeah,
you
for me personally, I've done fractional on and off for a dozen years, so I will take that equally with a full-time gig. If I go put a couple of fractional gigs together, then it to me it's more about the quality, the engagement, and what I'm doing at this point in my career than whether it's full-time or not. Than the full-time gigs that weren't satisfactory, and I've had some fractionals that were a lot more satisfactory. So I'm looking more on the satisfaction side while still optimizing the income side of it too.
Because then, Rusty, it sounds like you must be charging enough. Because some of the
Right.
numbers that I've heard on this call and also on previous calls were much, much lower than what I was expecting to hear. I mean,
Yeah. So my minimum engagement is 3 months. It's a minimum of a day and a half a week for 3 months. So it doesn't take me long to get, if I get 2 engagements, then I'm easily at a net 0 from a full-time job, and a third engagement, which still wouldn't be a full week, still gives me time to do biz dev and all my other stuff, far exceeds my typical income. And so those are the only type of engagements that I'll take on. I've had people come to me and say, hey, will you do something hourly or things like that? And I just turned it down. I don't want to be a lawyer charging them for 15 minutes for reading an email. And because the problem I don't like in that is it gets into a lot more negotiation on price in my mind. If I say I'm going to charge you, let's say $250 an hour, And oh, by the way, you send me an email, there's 15 minutes. Then you get into the minutia. Or if I say, I'm going to charge you 10 grand for 2 days a week for a month, and it's a minimum commitment of 3 months, we're looking at a bigger perspective. We're looking at a more strategic value and things like that. And for me, it changes the conversation. And then we're looking at a bigger scope. And again, it gets me embedded, which is what I want as a fractional. I want to be deep with the company, working side by side rather than just off on the side. And trust me, I took a few of those as I was early on doing this. I would call it more project consulting, and it was very unsatisfactory to me and kind of to the customer at the end of the day, because it just wasn't, it didn't bring as much value to them as I found these deeper engagements have been.
That is super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Corelia, I saw you had your hand raised and then also put in the chat a question for Rusty. That day and a half, like, how did you perfect that formula? Was that over time?
Yeah, it was kind of over time. I you know, again, I had a lot of questions around hourly. I quickly turned that down. I got into a couple of projects. They didn't work out both sides. It was a little hit and miss. So this is kind of like launching a new product. And you're testing your pricing strategy, you're testing your packaging strategy. And I look at it the same way. You know, the question is, then in this fractional market, you know, how do you stand out? You know, what differentiates you out there, and then how do you package that together? So I think you're the product. So what's the formula that gives you the uniqueness and the value to the customer?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I forgot why I had originally raised my hand, but that begs another question though about how did you guys go about differentiating, I guess, maybe your competitive analysis? What did that look like in terms of, I feel like the market is probably flooded with a lot of people who have the same thoughts as everybody on this call, like, well, maybe I'll just give it a try for a bit. Yeah, just how do you go about understanding kind of your place within the sea of folks out there freelancing, whether it's fractional or consulting or whatever it might be?
Well, I think there's two ways to do that. One, your listening tour, part of the JSC listening tour, I think is helpful. What did people tell you really do well? And the other thing, and this comes from running a startup, developing a startup, is go develop yourself a tagline and test it on people. And then when does your tagline stand out for you and resonate with people? And I've been doing some of that recently, and just as I've been networking and talking with people, I kind of keep refining my tagline, and it'll take a while for you to get that right. But if you'll play with your tagline, I think then you'll understand how you differentiate yourself and stand out.
Yeah, and building on that, I feel like you have to define, like, what is it that you do, and then who do you do it for, and try and make
Right.
those as niche as possible, because then they can expand beyond that as you talk to clients.
So I teach AI design thinking at the college level, and we do a lot of like flipped classroom audience participation. So I just put in the chat my tagline, which is I make AI fun when starting out. How about you all? Like, what are your taglines or ideas for differentiating yourself? And I know we all want to hear Rusty's, so.
I'll share my latest with you. Again, it's still an iteration. So mine's leadership for optimizing how high value B2B engagements.
And then mine is I help global companies elevate their brands through social media.
Sure, I can share mine, one that I'm kind of testing, and it's I don't really have a target audience. Maybe I could actually get some feedback from this group right now, but it's I orchestrate teams and organizations from a product perspective.
Right. Anyone else want to jump in with theirs?
I don't have like a formal one. I'm just toying with it now, but it's more like I help small media businesses grow and scale their operations.
Yeah, and I was able, like, I was starting my business as I was starting the Never Search Alone process. So for me, it did go hand in hand and was very helpful. All of the things that we were doing with my group, and then also what I was trying to set up as my own business. And then somebody in the chat asked, do you have a website? Do you heavily point people to it? How effective is it? Are you tracking metrics on the page visits, CTAs, etc.? So I built a website through a website called Copyfolio, and they had a free option, and it was very easy just to like plug things in. And so I like set it up, but it is not my main thing that I point to. I point to my LinkedIn. Because then you're able to connect directly with people there. And then I feel like it's more active. I'm updating it more frequently. I'm doing more posts there. So that's my number one that I push to. And then also at networking events, I'm going to do a little tip. On the LinkedIn app, if you're at an event and you want to add people, you can go up to the search bar. Okay. And then there's a little QR code looking thing. And then it pulls up a QR code that then people can just pull up their camera app and get to your LinkedIn and add you right then and there. So I don't have business cards. I just always am pulling this up. So that's a little tip from me. Anyone else want to jump in about websites?
Yeah, so I speak a lot about using AI.
Actually, you're on mute.
I noticed that, yeah. Thanks. Instead of a website, if you have a company in some way, which I think we all will, even if it's only a sole proprietorship, LinkedIn allows you to create a distinct brand and a distinct page for your company. This was a tip I got, and I just started doing it. And in fact, you could have multiple of them. And I highly recommend this. You have your individual person, and then you have your company name. And that company name can be very targeted to a particular niche, and it can do its own posts. It can be followed. It can have its own identity. And this is all very LinkedIn legal. And LinkedIn, I think, gives companies actually more power than it gives individuals who are not premium. So I've just started down this road, but from what I can tell, I highly recommend it. And especially if you're consulting or just working in two different arenas, there's super value to separating your personal brand, which is whatever it is, with your company, which does a very particular thing. So good luck with that.
And then JZ.ai, I saw you wanted to jump in, so want to hear what your thoughts were.
Oh, I think that's amazing. I can't believe you have like multiple company pages. That's such a good idea. For those of us who don't want to focus. But I think I speak a lot about building AI websites for free in 5 minutes, and happy to give anyone like a 30-minute free tutorial or send you to one of my talks. But people really over-index on this website. If you can publish it in 5 minutes and drive traffic to your calendar link, great. But it's just like a way for employers to see that you're serious, right? Like I wouldn't spend like $60,000 in 6 months, like making a website that just says like I'm serious. So definitely, prioritize like the one-on-one meetings and the calendar links, like nothing else really matters.
I completely agree. Focus on your network, not on these other things that you think might help. Like it's the network that's going to help. And then I created a LinkedIn profile for my business as well. And I feel like the main benefit of that is then on my LinkedIn, it has like for my current job, my business. And I think having that official logo rather than just like a gray slate is very helpful. And then just a LinkedIn tip that I heard recently that I was shocked that I didn't know before or didn't even think about is that how recruiters are finding people on LinkedIn is by searching for a job title and then like current. So whatever you have on your LinkedIn, make sure the job title you want is your current job title. So like even if you were laid off a few months ago, so you put your laid off date, put a new thing to make sure that you have your job title as your current, the job title you're looking for as your current job. So something to think about, think about how recruiters might be looking for you.
Do you think that matters if it's like product? So for example, in product, I have my business called Orchestra, and then I have like founder / lead facilitator. But I wonder if like founder / like product management consulting, although I'm not sure if they look for product manager or they also / like product manager, product management.
Probably my guess would be project manager, but also maybe as you are talking to people, like if you have recruiters that you're close to, you can ask, and try and find out, dig into that. Cause I like, you can have multiple things. You can have founder / but make sure whatever it is also the job title you want. Brian, I
Right.
see your hand is raised.
Yeah, and I came across in the last 6 weeks a video from a recruiter explaining how to do that, and I shared it in the random Slack channel. If anybody wants it, let me know and I can send it to you separately or tag you in that post. But a couple of points, you can have more than one current role. Like you could have your consulting business and your full-time business, or you could have your founder and your consulting role or whatever. And then not only can you have multiple roles in this currently searching for, in my case, consulting services director, customer success director, then you can have like something like your candidate market fit in the description section where you would normally say, here's what I'm doing if I were employed. You say, here's what my dream role has. Here's all the value that I bring to your organization, so that the recruiter sees those keywords as well as the current role description, if that helps.
Can I jump in with a reaction, but also a question, which is from my personal experience of never having been called by a recruiter in my entire life to what I see around me, other than, AI software engineers or something. I mean, do recruiters ever reach out on LinkedIn? That doesn't seem to be a thing. It gets a lot of attention, but I just have not heard that people get called by recruiters unless they're the CEO or they're some sort of highly technical person. But if everyone's experience is different, I'd like to hear.
So I just put my answer in chat, but basically the more recruiters you connect to, the more industry thought leaders in your area that you follow or connect to, and the more of their messaging that you reply to, like, or repost, the higher you'll show up in recruiters and other searchers' feeds, and the more likely they'll contact you directly.
I just want to hear that it actually ever happened to anyone.
It happened, yes.
Okay.
And it happened to multiple folks in my JSC by following that approach. And
another tactic that I've heard and tried and actually, then saw more messages from it is if you have to refresh your looking for work every 30 days. So like every month, remove it and then add it back in. And so I don't have like the green banner, but it's like for the recruiters one. I have like 5 different job titles that I'm looking for or whatever. So I saved those off to the side, turned it off, turned it back on, added those 5 back into it. And then actually like within that week, got a couple messages. So I was surprised it worked, but it did. So I encourage you to try that out. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Can I ask for another audience participation? I have to go in 5 minutes, but can everyone say or write how you would define fractional work now that we've had this meeting?
Feel free to add in the chat or come off mute.
I think it maybe begs the question, are there more questions? Because I think it's really hard to define and be able to sell. Oh, Joe, same job splitting among multiple clients. Cariella, regular job, but just doing a fraction of it. Gloria, embedded in a company part-time, possibly in multiple companies. Melanie, embedded in a company in a strategic capacity, either for specific projects for a particular length of time. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have 4 minutes left, so feel free to keep asking your last minute questions, and then I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat. jz.ai, please put your information because I can tell everybody wants to keep following up with you. And so like feel free to reach out, and then also we're on the Slack. So what last minute questions do people have?
I have I'm curious, and I asked the question about the website because my website doesn't really, I'm not trying to point to me, like I have omarcorona.com, which I've let the website kind of expire. But I also have Orchestra as a website, which is this workshop, this facilitation practice, but that I hope to eventually build as an agency, where we do the workshops, but then we have consultants who come in and either advise or execute on a thing. So I'm just wondering if anybody has experience, I guess, either working at an agency kind of in this fashion or has ever tried to build an agency, and maybe, you know, how that is kind of a little bit different from just solo freelance consulting.
If I have a friend who like we did the same work and then I went on to have another full-time job and like now I'm doing this, that he decided to instead do an agency and so built it out himself. And there are definitely like some pros and cons to that, because then when like a client just didn't pay and so like now he's out that money personally because he's making sure the people that work for him get paid. So it's tough. I'm not gonna lie. Like it seems like a really tough thing to do. So just make sure you're like set up properly legally and everything, as you get into that. But I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. And then I also see that Gloria has her hand raised. So I want to make sure to get to her question. Anyone else have anything to add? Cool. We'll get to Gloria's question.
Practical one. In terms of naming, have you found it, and I'm also looking for full-time work in parallel, have you found it easier to just say like your name consulting, or have people like actually come up with like a clever company, creative company name, and what works best?
I think that part was kind of fun. I feel like you could do one of those exercises where you just like put a timer on your phone for 3 minutes and then just write out all the words that you feel like could be associated with you. So it's like, I don't know, your pet's name. And like, I did a nickname that like, I'm like Stacy Ace. So I did Ace Digital. And I also like, then was like really picky about like, do I want digital? Cause I feel like social's like too small. And so, yeah, I thought that was really fun. And then I was also like brainstorming with friends, like just for a couple of weeks. It was just like a fun topic of conversation to have with people, to try and get a good sense of what to name a company.
If I could jump in just for the 30 seconds. I think, and I've made this mistake, it's super important to have a name that resonates with your client. It's ultimately about the client and not about you. I've made this mistake. I've seen other people, but if your client is something to do with pets, you know, have a name. They see the name and they know it's for them. Like that's critical. They don't know who Gloria Bradbury is, right? That's not, could be the best name in the world, but it means nothing to them. And so you want every bit of the branding to work for selling to that client and to be meaningful to that client. And so ideally, the name resonates with your target market in some way.
Yeah, that's excellent points. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been such a great conversation. So let's all stay connected, and thank you for coming. And thank you, JZ, for all of your insight.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm sure we're looking for more speakers. So if any one of you, Rusty, I think jumped, but if any one of you wants to talk, just put it into the chat, the Slack chat.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Stacy. Thanks, Casey.